Hello, I am Jan Worshadams, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Today, you are here with us watching our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion show brought to you each and every week. Please also make sure to check us out at joinmayshad.com for all of our upcoming programming content and how you too become a member of how we revolutionize the way in which women network, form community, and do business together. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all of our upcoming shows. I'm here today with David Ohana. David is the CEO of 2N2 Hire. Hi, David. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for being with us today. You are the CEO of 2N2 Hire, the industry's most advanced non-biased breakthrough recruitment tool. Previously, David had 20 years of foreign exchange capital market experience. End-to-end Hire technology is set to save businesses an average of 40 hours in the recruitment process. For getting long hours working on sourcing and screening candidates, this is the platform that will help employers, recruiters, and companies find the best talent. It's interesting, David, in our conversation leading up to the show, you had made a really important statement. And I'm going to repeat it in my own words. I'm going to paraphrase, and I want us to talk about it. You had said that if you're in the recruitment space, directly or indirectly, and you don't acknowledge that there is bias that exists and how candidates are sourced and recruited and hired, you're blind. Let's talk about that. What does that mean for you in the work that you do? And why is that statement really important for us to get to the root cause of really what's going on in this particular moment in time of the pandemic?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. The reason is pretty simple. When you look at statistics, 86% of executives are male and 14% are women. The workforce is 50-50, right? All of these women or minorities or men went to the same school, same education system, same set of values, same intelligence, but yet women don't get promoted as fast as men. So looking just on a mathematical, it makes no sense, the numbers, right? And it's pretty clear why. There is a bias in the recruitment process. And this is why, especially in this time of pandemic, where 50 million people lost their jobs, I think now is the best time actually to try to find a solution that benefits corporations and women and minorities. And this is why we came with a solution.
David, let's get to the heart of the matter of why bias exists, because we talk a lot at Mayshad around unconscious bias and implicit bias and the ways in which we may tend to not even understand the ways in which race, class, gender, ethnicity really impact our worlds on a day-to-day basis, let alone in the workplace. Talk to us about what you find in your space and what's happening.
Well, bias comes from fear or lack of knowledge. Many people are scared of things that they don't know. So, for example, I'm going to talk a personal story in my family. They immigrated from Morocco to Canada. They were in the medical field, and when they applied, they couldn't get a job because they did not know what a Moroccan was in Canada 60 years ago, right? So they had to go through and fight and work and show them that they were talented also. And gradually they opened up their own corporations and succeeded. The same applies for anybody else. I think that many men are threatened by women that are actually educated, amazing workers, and they still have this old mindset of, oh, well, why should we change something that works? Well, no, it does not work. A corporation that's not diversified, that does not give equal rights, equal pay, or equal treatment to either women, minorities, or men, is not a corporation that in the long run will succeed. So they have to get educated on the fact that bias does exist. They have to admit that when you look at their workforce, if a company has 98% of people are white males, well, something is wrong. When society is so diversified, especially when you look at New York, Montreal, Toronto, all those big cities, you walk in the street, you see people from every different background and culture. And what we want to promote is equality for everybody, because once you create equality, you create a society that is sane, a society that actually where everybody has an equal chance, everybody has equal revenues, and it creates a climate of peace, of prosperity, of everything that comes with it is positive. And when you're in a society that discriminates, well, we know what happens. It could easily turn into something terrible. Uh, we see women, women losing their jobs or getting fired for no apparent reason, just because they're women, and that's wrong. And we need to eliminate that. We're in 2020. This type of attitude should not exist. And unfortunately, we see it. For sure, we see it, and it's pretty clear. We saw many articles on many big corporations with all those big lawsuits, right, where women weren't treated fairly, and and it still does exist, unfortunately.
David, it's interesting what you're saying, and I'm wondering, in so many countries, there are laws against discrimination in the workplace and laws that protect people, particularly those people that are in protected classes, many of which you mentioned and what you just said, from being eliminated in their roles and from ensuring that there is equity in the hiring practices. But we know that that's not often the reality, obviously. That's why we're here talking today. Do you think that given now in the way in which the COVID-19 pandemic has shaken up so much of just the fabrics of all of our institutions and infrastructures, that employers will be forced to take a look at some of these things now in a different way? And how are technology companies like yours possible solutions for helping companies do just that?
Well, that's a great question, but there's two aspects and two answers to that question. First of all, yes, indeed, there are laws against discrimination, but could you testifying, like, for example, if you do get fired and you want to go to court, it takes a long time, right? It could be complicated sometimes, so many people will just drop it off and say, "I'm going to pass to another job," and that's it, that's all. But very important to mention, discrimination since COVID, I believe, has been the highest, and I'll explain why. When you're in a financial crisis and you're allowed to cut as many employees as you want because of the crisis, it's very easy to target women and minorities. It's very easy. You don't need no justification. Those laws do not apply really. So during every crisis, and we saw during the first crisis, many women were fired and opened up their own businesses, right? They turned negativity into positivity. That being said, now these companies have fired over 50 million people. Eventually, when the economy is going to come back, they will need to rehire them. So now is the time to implement systems that when you hire or rehire, uh, it must be objective. It must be objective, it must be bias free, and it must be based on competence. That's it, that's all. It cannot be based on gender, color of your skin, or your sexual orientation. It does not apply. You apply for a role, it's either you fit the role or you don't fit the role. And this is where we believe, strategically speaking, we are the perfect timing for companies to adopt this type of solution. Not only we bring them an aspect that saves them a lot of time, a lot of it's a burden to read 1,000 CVs. It is a burden for a recruiter. Well, we do that for the recruiter. Not only that, we qualify people, and you just concentrate on the interview, right? So basically, I'm happy. I'm not happy that people lost their jobs, but I'm on the positive side. I believe that good things are going to come out of it. I believe that many women and minorities and men are going to open up companies, um, and the rest are going to either relocate in different industries, or I believe the education sector is going to be very positive. I believe now that with everybody working from home, a lot of people will have to learn more about technology, about Skype, all those resources. And I believe that governments and corporations are going to invest massively uh, for education, which I always prone, because with education comes conscience, and with conscience comes equal rights, and so I'm looking at it very positively.
Thank you for that. Let's talk a bit about the ways in which implicit bias really factors into HR departments or hiring managers' perspective. And we know that, for example, you can assume quite a bit just based upon someone's name or where they went to school or the country in which they were born, right? And so many of these things, I think, and you would love to get your thoughts on this too, David, like really play out in the sense of the assumptions that we bring to the table when we walk in the door. And often, we like to say that we think that, it's not the stereotypes and the assumptions and the perceptions of others that we form in the workplace, but these are brought with us when we go into the office, right? So that's years of socialization from family, from friends, from children, from childhood, from schools, right? And so it's a lot of unpacking and it's a lot of unlearning to learn how to do this in a different way. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, how is technology going to help lead that when, number one, technology is driven by humans, is created by humans? And so isn't there kind of necessarily or unnecessarily implicit bias just based in AI itself? Because, the creation of that comes from human beings. Let's unpack that a bit.
Okay, so that's a very good question. So basically, the two and two hire software, just to give you a bit of a concrete example, only analyzes brute data, only analyzes skills and competence within a CV of a person. Second of all, we anonymize the CV. So we don't put the name of the person. We give you a score. We tell you why you qualify. What are your hard skills, your soft skills. We take in consideration your whole package, whether it's your education, where you went, high school, your grades, and we give you a score. But when you don't put the name, all the bias starts when you receive on the sourcing, when you receive the CV of someone, all bias. So whether you see somebody called Mohammed or a woman, it's really easy to say, I'm not giving them a chance for an interview. But the key is we're not saying we're going to eliminate racism from day one. But sometimes when you get an interview, it could change the perspective of someone and could say, you know what? Oh, maybe they're not that bad, right? Let's start with the beginning. Let's start gradually teaching them that women are not evil, immigrants are not evil, right? They're not a threat. They're actually they're a complement to your corporation. They you need them, right? So give them a chance for an interview. And when there's a score, and when you're a recruiter, and your boss could see that out of 10 job offerings, you never hired either a woman or a minority, at least now there's an audit. Whereas when it's a CV, a paper CV, you're like, oh, I didn't fit the role. How can you justify it? Now we have AI that gives you a ranking. Now the recruiter has to justify why he hired someone. And that for me is the big difference. And when you're followed and when you know that you're not hiring someone for the wrong reasons, right? But there's a score telling you this is the person. Why aren't you hiring? And when you're accountable, accountability brings change. And this is what we created with ourselves.
I love what you just said around the level of accountability and how that can change. And I think that like many employers use recruiting firms, right? And so they're relying on the recruiter and the relationship that they have with that recruiter to actually help source candidates for them, right? So I'm wondering, so many times employers will say, well, we'd love to be able to hire women, we'd love to be able to hire people of color, but they're just not interested in working for us, right? And so my pushback would be, well, maybe you're just not looking for them in the right places because we're all here, right? And so I would imagine then that working with recruiters, like there's so much potential for them to change their mindsets and their perceptions as well in the sense of how they actually source clients, right? So if I correct in understanding, like your clients are potentially twofold. They're recruiting firms and recruiters themselves, and also direct employers.
Exactly. Our software applies for everyone. Applies for recruiters. Love our software. It saves them a lot of time and energy. And actually, companies too that are hiring, or sometimes they don't want to use recruiters because maybe it could be too pricey or for whatever reason, right? But you're right. To your point, this software applies for both type of corporations, right? And to your point, um, like I said, discrimination starts with sourcing. And if we eliminate, if we bring objectivity to sourcing and we hold people accountable for who they hire and who they fire, makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit about your journey as well. So you didn't start in the recruitment industry. Your background is financial services and foreign exchange markets. What was your own journey that led you to where you are today? And what have you learned about yourself from your journey in the sense of how does it make you a more impactful leader as the CEO of your company?
Well, on a personal level, well, I was working in the financial industry, loved what I was doing, was really, really fun, but it was time for me to help society. I was raised by two women, my mother and my grandmother, which were very strong, career-oriented women that went through many difficult times, especially during their times, and they fought and they succeeded. So my role models were them, and I'm doing it for all the women that actually. I'm going to go on a personal conversation. The role of a woman within society is priceless. Not only they have they bring kids into this world, they do a lot, and not only they do a lot, after doing everything, people don't recognize it, and that for me is unacceptable. uh, a society that treats women and men the same way is a society that succeeds. We are all human beings, and like I said, I wanted to make my mom proud, and especially my grandmother who doesn't live anymore, to show her that actually I appreciate everything she's done for me. Uh, that's my first mission. It was to make them proud. But second of all, it's what they suffered when they came, when they immigrated. And the stories that I heard were quite awful. And for me, it was like, how did you manage to go through that? Where did you find the strength to go through that discrimination? And it wasn't like today. It was like 10 times worse. And they found a way. And the way they found it is they said, just give me a chance. Just go to the interview. Just try me out. That's how they would do. They would ask employers just to try them out. Even one of my uncles offered to work for free just for them to give them a chance. And actually, he became very successful. So, thanks to them, we're in a society that really advanced, and we have to continue. We're much better than 30 years ago, but we still have a lot to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, David, and thank you for sharing your personal experience, your personal story too, because I feel like it helps us to understand the passion that you have built into the company that you're growing and scaling as well. And I'm wondering, in this moment in time too, I feel like we're all in it, right? So this is a global pandemic. It has lasting consequences, of course, as we've seen. Um, Ranging from locally in the sense of our own communities to the global level. And we know that, the world in which we were operating even before the pandemic is interlinked and interwoven through technology. Now we're all working from home, using and relying and being dependent even more so on these same technologies. And that really has shifted the world of work, particularly for women. And what we're seeing now is that families are diverse. There may be, a single women living on their own. There may be women who are married or with significant others or with family members or, living under the same roof, living, working, playing, loving, sharing, right? There's a lot of stress. And what we're seeing now is that there's this double burden placed upon women for maintaining everything that's going on functionally within the household and yet still keeping their careers on track and keeping their jobs and leading teams and et cetera, et cetera. And so would love to get your insights on what you think the future of that looks like as we continue with the world of remote work for many of us across the country, across the world. And then as we start to go back, particularly if children are not yet fully in school, right? So what is the balance and how will employers be shifting how they think about recruiting and hiring and retention and ways in which companies like yours can be a part of that solution?
Well, first of all, I will say something very interesting. I am based in Montreal, Quebec. Quebec has understood that a long time ago, and we have daycares at $7 daycares. So you could send your kid $7 a day. It includes 3 meals. The reason why Quebec did that was to empower women, for them to be allowed to go back to work. So I believe that the burden of daycares and helping women has to be split between the government and employers. I believe that a woman would rather have a benefit that allows her to put her daughter or her son in a nice daycare while she works. And I think that employers should encourage that, because it's not fair for just a woman to stay home and to take care of the kids while the husband works, right? The new reality, it's different. I see it myself with my wife. I have 3 beautiful kids, and we share everything. I used to go to work and come back home. She used to go to work. We used to have somebody to help us a little bit, but now we have no choice to communicate, and we have no choice to help each other. And I think this crisis made realize men how much their women do, and that for that I'm very appreciative, and I strongly believe that corporations should invest in women. Strongly believe, and not only in women, in children, right? And I come from that background, so we're lucky enough to have full support of a government behind us. Um, I could only pray for you guys to get the same support, because it's so helpful. Uh, it's unbelievable. It's actually, and we're not talking about daycares. You walk in there, it's like a 5-star hotel, right? Where they get activities, and it really brought women at par with men. They're relieving them from that burden, right? And it's not fair. Like, I agree, it's not fair that it only goes on them. But I think COVID changed everything, because people are going to work from home, right? And I believe that COVID has a positive impact on women. It's going to allow them to make decisions with their husband, and or their partners or whatever, and to say decide what they want to do. Right? No, it's not going to be the universe, because I remember my wife used to work in the banking industry. That's a perfect example. Her schedule wasn't flexible. It was very stressful on her. Very stressful. She had to bring the kids at 8 o'clock on the dot. Then she had to be at work, then go back. We always have to accommodate. This now is Nowadays, employers are very flexible. And you know why? They understood that people can work from home also. So they're saving a lot of cost on rent, buildings, uh, everything, like social benefits that they used to offer. Why don't they give a social benefit for women? A special social benefit that says, if you want to work with us, we will accommodate you, and we will give you a schedule that is actually very flexible. And we see it now. Call centers, companies adopted women because they have no choice. The reality is, it's not like before. Nobody has to impress nobody. You have a family, you have kids to take care of, you have your job to take care of, right? It's part of life. And the corporate world has learned it the hard way, and I think it's only going to get better. In my opinion, it's only going to get better, because it must get better.
It's interesting. We see many of the tech giants here in the United States like encouraging employees to work from home, at least, even now through 2021. And so what I'm hoping is that many other smaller and mid-sized companies also take their cues from those, from some of those tech giants and say, okay, we can actually do this at home. I think the jury's still out in the sense of, number one, just psychologically getting through the pandemic, getting through COVID-19. And for those of us that have been sick or that have known family members or friends or colleagues that have gotten sick from it, it's a long haul, right? So we're kind of in this all together for the long haul. But also wondering, where are you experiencing some of the growth happening from an employer perspective, understanding that to many of the points you already raised, that in this moment in time, employers are going to become much more flexible, have to become much more flexible within the sense of what an ideal candidate looks like. So we have the ideal candidate, but then we also have for those millions of people, at least here in the United States, that have filed unemployment claims, knowing that they're also going to have to think about like how to reinvent their careers to stay fresh and relevant and current in their spaces as well. Where are you seeing some of that growth come from?
You mean on the employment side? It's gonna well, obviously the tech industry is always is going to grow, obviously, but I believe that many companies, whether even restaurants, actually are going online right now, and I think that we're shifting toward more of an online model. I think that corporations will adapt pretty fast, but I think also that small, medium-sized companies will have no choice. Also, why? Because if people are not happy, they will leave, simply leave, right? Uh, Sometimes society, uh, pressure comes from within society, and if you cannot afford sending your kids to daycare, or you'll simply not work, right? And this is not a solution. So if you don't work, right, it's not profitable, right? And it's not right for a woman to stay home because she cannot afford daycare. So I think even small, medium-sized companies are going to understand that they will need labor, they will have to invest in women, and they will have to invest in men. But on the technology side, they will invest a lot, and they want to make sure that they will have no choice to make sure that their workforce is happy, because now we all have a choice, right? We all have a choice. We could either work from home for a big corporation, or we could work for a smaller corporation and hopefully have more flexibility. But if a smaller corporation does not offer you the flexibility that a large corporation offers you, they're going to have an issue with staffing, and no staffing, no revenues. So I think that bottom line, even though the intentions are not out of the goodwill, in my opinion, bottom line, profits are important for them, and they will have to adapt to the people that create those profits. That's why I say now is the time. Now with the pandemic is the time to ask what we want as a society, what we need as a society, and equality as a society. Now is the perfect timing historically. We realized one thing with COVID: whether we're rich, poor, white, black, women, men, we're all equal. We're all home, and we're stuck. Right? So the beauty about COVID, it taught us that. So now is the time to change.
It's interesting because I feel like in some ways our worlds have become much smaller, right? Because we're literally stuck at home, for the most part, with wide variation in some places. But then also the world has become much larger in the sense of, I remember many, many, many years ago hearing the CEO of LinkedIn say that he joined LinkedIn primarily because he saw that platform as a way in which to democratize the way in which people network and connect with each other. So theoretically, an entry level worker would be able to have access to the CEO of whatever large company with everything in between, right? Now we know that LinkedIn is a tremendous way for people to be able to connect with each other and meet and research, right? People you want to meet. But also knowing that there's an empty spot there in the sense of, there's something to be said about, how do you really connect with 10 million people that are part of your, larger extended network on a platform that large, and still have some human touch with it that comes with it, right? And what we're seeing now during the pandemic is that even though we're very socially isolated from each other, right? You and I are having this conversation via technology, but there's also something that's very warming about the fact that we're able to connect with people in different ways that we wouldn't have necessarily thought of connecting with them in the past. And what kind of opportunities and possibilities does that open when now, in a way, our network becomes even larger, right? Theoretically, right? Because we're not as reliant on that human face-to-face. We're not as reliant on the business trip or on the conference or getting on a plane, right? So from your perspective, how is that going to further evolve into how your industry grows and scales and experiences innovation in a period of time where it just seems in so many ways the world has stopped, but yet it hasn't, right? So we're full of all these contradictions. We'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I believe that the hiring process will eventually be automated, meaning that people don't have time Time is precious, right? So they will need to actually filter maybe differently, but the process, I believe the HR process will be less traditional than it was. I believe that technology will be used in order to improve that process. I think it's the only industry that is still old. The way you hire, right? You read a CV and this, and I think LinkedIn is not the solution. LinkedIn is great for providing a platform for people connecting together, and also providing candidates. But they provide you with uh, a lot of candidates. You still have to read it, right? I think industries like ourselves, where we go in the between, we don't compete with LinkedIn, right? And by the way, we're working on a solution uh, that also will provide job offerings for jobs that are less skilled, right? And for that, LinkedIn does not. You will rarely see a hairdresser on LinkedIn, right? You will rarely see a waitress or a waiter on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great platform, but I think there's many different platforms that are going to be created. But I think the most important will be the in between, where um, it saves a lot of time to companies. So in my opinion, our industry is going to grow. HR is going to revolutionize. I believe that women in the workforce is going to grow, and I believe that the best times are to come. I honestly believe the best times are to come. I'm so happy because I have two daughters myself, and I see it. I see it when I speak to people. Um, they're we're so much better than 30 years ago. We still, like I said, we have room, but our technologies, we're not going to be the only company and we're not the last company. We're proud to say that we built an algorithm that is fully gender bias, anything, but it's agnostic. 100% agnostic. It gives you the best result based on who you are, right? What you represent with your CV. But that being said, I believe that many companies like ourselves are going to go in that industry. And I believe that eventually it's going to be a platform where you're going to be looking for someone, and automatically you'll have like a Tinder, but for jobs. That's my opinion. That somebody's going to read that, is going to put a job offer. Your CV is going to be in the database. It's going to fit. It's going to say, there's a match. And then one's going to receive an email. There's going to be an interview, and it's going to eliminate bias. So I'm very, uh, that's where we're going towards that direction. And like I said, if you would connect people for relationships, we should connect people for jobs also, right? Um,
It's so true. You can swipe right or swipe left on whoever you want to date. So why not on a, potential job applicant as well,
And that's
right?
our vision. We're going there, and we're working on it actively. And why not, right? You swipe, and if you like it, if the person fits your role, you look at all the skills. Like I said, a career is like it's like a marriage, right? You spend 40, 50 hours a week with your colleagues, right? You get close to them, right? So you need to make sure that when you hire someone that fits. It's not only the score. What I say, you're not going to hire somebody who has 98% or 96. You might hire the person that has 87 or 85. Why? Because she fits better in your culture, right? But you're not going to hire somebody who has 10%. Doesn't fit the role at all, right?
Well, and isn't, to play devil's advocate here for a second, like, isn't that the way in which companies sometimes get into trouble, in the sense of hiring people who look like them because they fit within the corporate culture, right? And so we know that companies often may not take the best skilled based qualified candidate because they're really interested in building a cohesive culture, right? And in large part, sometimes that means like you hire people who look like you, right? And then that's where the bias comes in. And so let's talk about the mix between, hiring for skill fit versus hiring for culture, because they're both incredibly important. But how can you hire for culture in a way that's
Well,
where you're still being very active in eliminating the
that's
biases?
a very good question. So the real problem is that it's not even hiring for cultures, that women and minorities don't even get a chance for an interview. So with our system, actually, when you're accountable, when you're in front of five people, right, and there's an interview, five people are listening. Really have to justify why you don't want to hire someone, right? Whereas when you filter a CV and you receive a name and you see it's a woman, you say no, she does, and she doesn't get the interview. It's much easier to filter. So what we're pushing is the interview, because we know that when a woman or a man or a minority is going to show up in an interview, if they fit the role, they will most probably get the job. And it's going to be very hard for someone who is biased to say, "Oh, you know what? I don't like her." Why don't you like her?
What I see your company doing, David, is really not just equalizing the playing field, but also helping people have better experiences, more nuanced experiences, more empathetic experiences with people who may be different, with from different backgrounds, different. We often think of race, class, gender in this binary construct. You're either this or you're either that. We know that identity is really complex, and people just aren't one thing, right? And so I think that, and all the research shows this as well, is that companies perform better from a profitability perspective, from an inclusion perspective, from a productivity perspective when teams are diverse, right? And there's often I really appreciate what you said around there's a difference between someone just not knowing what they don't know, not knowing what you don't know, right? Versus someone who's intentionally acting in a way that could be perceived to be discriminatory or hostile or less than equitable, right? And to be able to help companies and employers be able to think through and tease all of that out differently. Because if it's an issue of learning and expanding one's horizon and really helping them to understand that, they're walking into the room, they're walking into the company with just predisposed notions or assumptions about what they think people are like without really understanding that that's not really truly what people are like, that's one thing, right? And your system, you actually have proven that, your platform itself saves about 40 hours in the recruiting process for one position. Talk to us a bit about, what really ultimately takes hiring managers and HR teams so long? Is it teasing through resumes? Is it just the initial screens? Like, really, what is the most time-consuming process out of the recruitment
Oh,
process?
and I know they'll agree because I used to own a recruitment firm. The thing is, all those recruitment firms, as well as corporations, they go on big platforms such as LinkedIn Recruiter, Job Boom, Monster, right? And they acquire CVs basically, and they receive a lot of data. The things that take the most time is once you receive that data, you have to separate it. You have to read the CV, then you have to do a team meeting, then who we're keeping, who we're not keeping, and then you eliminate another, and then you out of 1,000, if you receive 1,000 CVs, you're only going to read probably 100, 150 max. You're not going to read 1,000 of them, right? And out of the 150, you're gonna have an interview with, let's say, three or four of them, right? Um, did you hire the best candidate? No, you didn't analyze the whole pool, right? You just went with because you had no time. So we save 60 to 70% of the sourcing time. Literally, they could plug in 1,000 CVs in our software, literally, and they will have a ranking of the top 20 within a minute. And from there, they could filter, read those top 20 CVs and concentrate on the interview and concentrate on giving a chance. The time they saved, I would instead of doing 3 interviews with 3 candidates, I'd rather do 15 interviews with 15 different candidates, right? And the time that I saved, like the tremendous amount of time I saved reading those CVs, I'd rather concentrate on the people and on the human aspect of the hiring process, right? And that's where we give a chance because uh, right now they don't they just go with their gut feeling. Oh, this we believe she's the best or he's the best or whatever it is, right? And they don't. And what happens is when you don't hire a good candidate, what happens? Most of the time they leave or you fire them, right? It creates a turnover. So not only we save you a lot of time on the sourcing and money on the sourcing aspect of it, we bring you the best candidate. By default, statistically speaking, it's going to be 50% men, 50% women on the long run. You create better financial results for your corporation, it's proven, and you have a lower turnover rate. So we create equality, diversity, cost benefit, right? Lower turnover. Why wouldn't you adopt our solution? And we're willing to offer it for any corporation to try it out for 30 to 60 days for free. Just take it, try it, save some time, right? We're there. We want to bring a change. We want to bring a change. We're not only here for the corporate profits. We're here to bring a change, and we want people to call us to adopt our solution. We don't want to go on a massive marketing. People are going to know that it works. People are going to be happy, and people talk, right? So this is our goal. This is our mission. And like I said, we always encourage corporations that want to empower women or empower minorities also, to make sure that we create a better world. We need to create a better world because we see it on TV. We see the inequalities. Like we see that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting even wider, right? So we need to hold accountable people. So our software does everything. So if a corporation says, I'm not interested, why? You're saving money. We're not. You're saving money. You have a role towards your employer, right? To cut costs as much as possible, especially during a crisis. So, like I said, coronavirus unfortunately created a lot of loss of jobs, but fortunately will create a thinking where corporation will say, where can I save? Right? Where can I save? And if I could save, I'm going to adapt a solution. And if I could get the best candidate that I only need to train for 6 months, and then she leaves or he leaves or whatever, and they get fired, it costs me a lot of money again. I need to hire really the best candidate for the job that I'm posting, right? And that's that's my opinion.
David, we have, many women and men who are watching the show today who have been unemployed or furloughed because of the pandemic. What advice do you have to job seekers or men and women who want to pivot in their careers and try something new? What advice do you have for the individuals who are out there today listening and really craving advice?
I say do not be scared of change. That's what I always say, right? Do not be scared of change. Change is always good. I would tell them to concentrate on if they don't have skills on, let's say, Excel or Word or PowerPoint, a little bit of graphic design or whatever it is, to concentrate a little bit more on learning it while they're home, right? Learning those tools. But what I would tell them is also, please provide us with your CVs. And if there's something on your CV that is not proper, we will tell you. We will let you know. We'll tell you you're missing this, you're missing that, because employers, we know what they're looking for, right? So sometimes you might be a very good candidate, but you don't know how to write it down, right? So we will obviously let you know this is what's missing on your CV. So we want to create a database of CVs for people that are looking for jobs, are employable. But not only that, we want to create also a database for job offers to make sure that when we place someone, we place them in something they want and something they're happy with, right? So I would tell them, don't be scared of change. Learn about technology and all the tools out there like Skype, Zoom, all of that, right? Take some time every day, an hour a day, a couple of hours a day, perfect a little bit your Excel or whatever computer skills. And third of all, send us your CV. We will make sure that if there's something in your area, we will provide you with a job offer. We're working on it actively, and we want to support uh, these people, and they could always reach out. We're always there for them.
David, thank you so much. David Ohana, the CEO of 2N2 Hire. David, thank you for spending the morning with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a really pleasure. And like I said, I believe that it's a noble cause, and we should all help each other in creating a society that is diverse, equal, and where everybody lives in actually in peaceful peace. I believe that everything starts from where everything starts with your job. And if you're happy home and you're happy with your job and you have revenues, well, you could offer a better future for your family, send them to school, education, and education is power. And we want to make sure that we empower everybody to education.
Thank you. Thank you, David. So beautifully stated. Everyone, thank you for being with us again today. I'm Jem Rashidams, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. Please remember to check us out at joinmayshad.com for all of our upcoming programming, scheduling, and how you too can become involved with how we're revolutionizing the way that professional women connect, engage, and do business together.